This is the Chinese Civil War, the origin story that helps explain why China and Taiwan might go to war in the present day. It also explains why China is communist, why Taiwan isn't recognized as a country, and why America is such a staunch ally of Taipei. We'll look at the conflict and the impact it had in just a moment, but first, let's take a look at how it came about. This is the Chinese coast. Beijing is here, Shanghai is here, and here's Taiwan. The year is 1911, and this story begins with the Xinhai Revolution, which breaks out here in the city now known as Wuhan. Followers of a man called Sun Yat-sen have risen up against the Qing dynasty, which has ruled over China for almost 300 years. Sun is a political revolutionary known as the father of modern China, and is also the founder of the Kuomintang, a political party that is one of the two main characters of this story. Born in China and educated in Hawaii, he has spent most of his life in exile in the West, funding uprisings against the monarchy based in Beijing. The reason is the dynasty is failing. Tied to tradition and wary of outsiders, the king have presided over a period known as the Century of Humiliation. This has seen China and its valuable resources carved up by powers once considered inferior, which have now leapfrogged it: the British, Russians, Japanese, French, and Germans. Sun wants China to have a modern government that can compete with its rivals, and he wants it to be based on his three principles: democracy, nationalism, and public good. All of Sun's previous uprisings have failed, but in Wuhan, he succeeds. The army defects, the rebels declare an end to the Qing dynasty, and then encourage others to join them. The revolution spreads, Sun is recalled from exile, and on January 1st of 1912, he declares the founding of the new Republic of China. There's just one small problem, however. Puyi, the last Qing emperor, is still on the throne, and Sun has no easy way to force him off it. So he has to strike a deal with the emperor's most powerful general, Yuan Shukai, commander of the fearsome Beiyang army based here in Beijing. Yuan will help get rid of the emperor, but in return, he wants Sun to step aside and allow him to rule as president. Sun agrees, provided Yuan upholds his three principles. So on February the 12th, 1912, Puyi abdicates, bringing to an end 2,132 years of continuous monarchical rule in China. So far, so good. But it does not take Yuan long to betray the rest of his pledge. The following year, he has an ally of Sun's assassinated, sparking a rebellion around Nanjing, which he quickly crushes. Sun and his allies go back into exile. Then Yuan tries to reinstate the monarchy and even names himself the new emperor. This prompts another, much larger rebellion, which forces Yuan to abdicate after just 83 days. He dies not long after from kidney failure, and with his passing, China fragments. This begins what's known as the Warlord period. Officially, the country is still ruled by the Beiyang government here in Beijing. But in reality, power rests with warlords who control specific regions, often with their own economies, laws, and even different currencies. This is where the major clans reside. But in reality, there are hundreds, if not thousands, of smaller ones, all competing for control. The result is near constant war and wildly uneven development across the country. In the countryside, peasants labor with tools that would have been familiar to a medieval farmer, while in coastal ports like Shanghai, modern life is taking hold. Foreign traders arrive as China opens up to the world, bringing with them banks, businesses, boutiques, even jazz clubs. These traders also bring foreign ideas, one of which strikes a chord with intellectuals in this new world of haves and have-nots: Marxism. In 1921, the Chinese Communist Party, or CCP, is founded during a meeting in Shanghai's French Quarter. This is the other main character of this story. Among the attendees is its future leader, Mao Zedong. A librarian and a trainee teacher, Mao is also a political revolutionary, but with a very different view of China's future from Sun. Rather than a Western-style democracy, Mao believes in creating a Marxist-Leninist state like the one that has just emerged in Russia. To that end, the CCP cultivates ties with the Bolsheviks and begins to get support from them. While that's happening in Shanghai, the KMT are also regrouping in the wake of Yuan's death. In 1917, Sun returns from exile and establishes a new base of power here in Guangzhou. He rallies his old supporters and begins a new quest to reunify China and make good on the promises of the revolution he began 5 years ago. Initially, he enlists local warlords to help him, but they prove unreliable allies. Sun needs his own military that will be loyal to him and his ideals, so he also turns to the Bolsheviks for help building it. The Russians are interested, but they have one condition. The KMT must work with their new allies in the CCP. These two are unlikely partners. They share a goal of revolution, but disagree about almost everything else. The KMT is also a delicate alliance between right-wing and left-wing factions, which Sun holds in balance, and introducing a new bunch of left-wingers risks upsetting that balance. But Sun needs an army, and so in 1924, the KMT and CCP join ranks as the first united front. Russian political and military advisors are soon dispatched to southern China, where they establish an officer training school and begin supplying weapons. Sun then hatches his master plan, an offensive dubbed the Northern Expedition, which will march up the coast, crush the warlords, retake Beijing, and reunify the nation. Preparations make rapid progress, but not rapid enough. In 1925, Sun passes away from gallbladder cancer, aged just 58. His death breaks KMT unity and sparks a power struggle between left and right-wing factions, each of which suspects the other of plotting against it. The struggle is eventually won by Chiang Kai-shek, a right-winger. Chiang is a career military man who is deeply mistrustful of the communists from the outset, believing they plan to steal power away from him and then ship him off to Russia. These suspicions only grow after he launches the Northern Expedition in 1926, meeting with nothing but success as his army sweeps north. In the wake of the attack, the communists begin setting up labor unions and stirring up the peasants. After Wuhan is taken, KMT left-wingers move here and establish an autonomous government. Then, in Shanghai, communist protesters rise up and more or less take the city before Chiang's army can arrive. Then, once he's in the city, the protests don't die down. Fearing the communists are now a threat to him personally and to the unity he is fighting for, Chiang decides to get rid of them. On April 12, 1927, Chiang's soldiers and local gangsters take to the streets of Shanghai, where they hunt down and execute hundreds, possibly thousands, of communists. This becomes known as the Shanghai Massacre and is the beginning of the White Terror, a full-on purge of communists in all areas Chiang controls. In total, tens of thousands, Mao's wife and sister thought to be among them, are killed, almost destroying the CCP and forcing it to flee into the countryside. This marks the beginning of the Chinese Civil War, a conflict which pits two former allies against one another in a duel for the fate of a nation. A conflict which sets off a chain of events that reverberates into the modern day. This is the Chinese Civil War, and this is Battleboard. This is southern China. Guangzhou is down here, Nanjing is up here, and here's Taiwan, which at this moment is ruled by Japan. It is August 1927. The communists have been forced from Shanghai and Wuhan, and Chiang's main army has moved away north to resume its attack on Beijing. But he has left behind auxiliary forces to hold the major cities. These are light infantry, armed with rifles and machine guns, though they do have some heavier weapons like mortars. The communists, meanwhile, hold no significant territory. They exist only as a guerrilla force, which at the moment is massing for an attack on Nanchang. Here, these are also light infantry, with rifles and machine guns either supplied by the Soviets or seized from the KMT. This army is small, numbering only around 20,000 men, compared to KMT forces, which now number somewhere close to 1 million, having absorbed a lot of the warlord armies. At 2 a.m. on August the 1st, the communists launch their attack, the Nanchang Uprising, and are initially successful, overrunning KMT forces that are taken by surprise. However, Chiang wastes no time organizing a counterattack, and by August the 5th, the city is back under his control and the communists are on the run once again. Though insignificant in the grand scheme of things, this battle will become known as the first fought by the People's Liberation Army, and August the 1st will become the anniversary of its founding. From there, the communists head south towards Guangzhou, where they attempt another uprising in December of that year. Initially successful, it is again crushed by a KMT counterattack. A third communist assault also takes place here, near the city of Changsha in September. Dubbed the Autumn Harvest Uprising and led by Mao Zedong, communist forces tried to march on Changsha, but are also pushed back by the KMT. These two beaten armies then retreat to the Jingang Mountains to regroup. Over the next 2 years, Chiang completes his conquest of Beijing. The northern expedition ends in success. The KMT takes over the Republic of China, and it relocates the capital here to Nanjing. But at the same time, the communists are also consolidating their power. By 1930, they have established a series of communist areas called Soviets, the largest of which is here, centered around the city of Rujin and called the Jiangxi Soviet. Home to Mao, it has its own laws, taxes, and a population of around 3 million people, a true state within a state. Until now, Chiang has been too busy to bother with these areas, but with his grand offensive finished, he sends his army to wipe them out. Beginning in December 1930 and continuing until October 1934, Chiang launches 5 encirclement campaigns to take these territories back. By now, his army has tanks, which they received from the Germans, heavy artillery, and an air force made up of biplanes, used for bombing and reconnaissance. The Communist Army is still light infantry, with a few captured artillery guns. They have increased their ranks to around 140,000, but the KMT army has also increased to 2 million. Not all of those men are in the south, however. Just 100,000 take part in the first campaign and 200,000 in the second. Surprisingly, the communists managed to defeat the first 4 campaigns using guerrilla tactics developed by Mao, inflicting heavy casualties on the ROC. But during the 5th campaign, Mao is no longer in charge. The communists abandon his guerrilla tactics in favor of more conventional warfare. Chiang also adopts a new strategy, building a front line of concrete blockhouses around the Soviets to cut off their supply routes. This combination spells disaster for the CCP. Its army is badly beaten, and just 87,000 troops manage to escape the encirclements and flee, Mao among them. This begins a series of retreats from the southern Soviets northwards that will later become known as the Long March. We're back on the Chinese coast. Here's Nanjing, here's the Jiangxi Soviet, and here's the communist forces that have just fled. It is now October the 15th, 1934. Over the course of the next year, what remains of the CCP will march 6,000 miles across some of China's harshest terrain to make it to the safety of the northernmost Soviet here at Yan'an. The first part of their march, however, takes them across southern China to Zunyi, here. Harassed by Chiang's troops and bombers along the way, by the time they reach the city, they have lost almost half of their men and they are shattered. Here in January of 1935, they hold a conference during which Mao takes back control of the military and turns the march northwards. Using guerrilla attacks once more, Mao evades multiple attacks by Chiang's forces and warlords which still dominate in western China, and at the same time, he leads his followers through mountains and harsh deserts. Another band of fleeing communists who meet with Mao here in Sichuan decide not to follow him and are all but wiped out as a result. On October the 19th, 1935, almost exactly a year after fleeing Jiangxi, Mao's forces arrive at this northern enclave. Of the original 87,000 troops who fled the south, just 8,000 now remain. But in the process, Mao has firmly established himself as the leader of the CCP. The legend of the Long March will act as a potent recruiting tool for the party to rebuild its strength and will significantly contribute to the cult of personality that develops around Mao. At this point, it should have been possible for Chiang Kai-shek to pursue his old rival and destroy them. And yet, the CCP survives. Why? Well, because back in 1931, before any of the Long March happened, the Japanese invaded and occupied Manchuria, a region off the northeastern edge of this map. Using the old emperor Puyi as a puppet, they set up a new state called Manchukuo, which they ruled from overseas, siphoning off its resources. This was wildly popular among the Japanese, sparking war fever which Chiang's generals fear meant a full invasion was not far off. But rather than face that invasion, he was busy pursuing the communists. All of that changes in December 1936. Here, in the city of Xi'an, 2 of Chiang's subordinates kidnap him. Rather than wipe out the communists, Chiang is instead forced into another alliance with them, a second united front, so that together they can tackle the real enemy, Japan. The general's fears prove prescient because the very next year, Japan launches a full-scale invasion of mainland China. The Chinese Civil War is now on hold. This is the start of the Sino-Japanese War, which will soon become part of the Second World War. This is the whole of China. India is over here, the Soviet Union is up here, and here is Beijing. Obviously, we don't have time to go into all the events of World War II here, and so we're going to skip ahead to its closing days in 1945, right before the Civil War restarts. Here's how the map looked before it began. The KMT is in control of most of the country, the Japanese are in control of Manchuria, and the communists have this one enclave. And here's how the map looks now. The Japanese have massively expanded their territory at the expense of the KMT, while the communists have also had a resurgence. But while the KMT have lost territory, the war has been kind to them in other ways. They've been working with the Americans against the Japanese, and now have vastly upgraded kit like M4 tanks, M40 fighters, and heavy artillery guns. The communists, meanwhile, are still light infantry. They have rifles, machine guns, and some artillery, but lack armor and especially air cover. On August 9th, 1945, the Soviets invade and occupy Manchuria. The same day, the Americans drop an atomic bomb on Nagasaki, forcing Japan's surrender not long after. With the sudden defeat of the Japanese, a land grab now breaks out for control of all the territory they used to hold. In this contest, the CCP is handed a big early advantage by their old Soviet allies. Stalin pulls his forces out of Manchuria in 1946, but not before handing over stocks of weapons captured from the Japanese. The CCP uses these to seize swathes of territory and valuable industrial land, including the city of Harbin, here, the first truly urban base they've had since Wuhan. Meanwhile, the KMT is mopping up control in the south. The US uses its warplanes to fly Chiang's troops into Japanese areas to accept their surrender, ensuring the CCP can't sweep in and take control here as well. The KMT and the US then try the same tactic in the north, flying troops up to Manchuria where they begin an attack on CCP territory. By August of 1947, they have advanced almost all the way to Harbin, carving out a long, thin strip of territory for themselves here. But this attack runs out of steam just short of the city, and from the end of 1947, and especially in 1948, things turn disastrously against the KMT. Why this happens is a subject that fills entire textbooks, and we can't do it full justice here. But we can summarize a few key points. The received wisdom is that the CCP won because of the support of the people, which allowed them to rally huge peasant armies against the KMT. While it's true the communists were popular among peasants because they took land away from its wealthy owners and gave it to the peasants, it doesn't seem like the whole truth. Another is that the KMT were desperately unpopular. Conscription policies during the war, a collapsing post-war economy, and corruption meant their troops lacked the will to fight. Again, there's some truth here. Large numbers of KMT troops did surrender in the battles we're about to see, contributing to their losses and strengthening the CCP. From a purely tactical point of view, we can see that KMT supply lines are stretched very thin, and they're fighting on territory that favors the communists, rural areas. Whatever the exact reason, the KMT is soon on the back foot, and by late 1948, they've been forced out of Manchuria, with hundreds of thousands of their troops surrendering along the way. At the same time, they're also forced out of Shandong province, here, opening the door for a communist attack on the key city of Zhushu, here. This is a KMT headquarters at a railway crossroads that's absolutely vital to supplying Chiang's troops further to the north. In November, the city is surrounded, rendering it useless and meaning all of these troops are now cut off. Then, between November and January the following year, the cities of Jiangjikou and Tianjin are captured, effectively isolating Beijing. In Zhushu, the situation is now desperate as soldiers eat their horses to survive. Significant numbers surrender, and in the end, Chiang orders his remaining troops to attempt a suicidal breakout. By January 10th, the city is fully under communist control. Hoping to avoid similar scenes in Beijing, the KMT garrison negotiate their surrender and are allowed to leave with the city mostly intact. On January the 31st, the communists enter Beijing and the battle is over. Combined, these three offensives have all but destroyed the KMT. From here, the end will be swift. In October of 1949, Mao proclaims the founding of the People's Republic of China in Beijing, and his forces begin pushing south to capture the last KMT strongholds. This begins the Great Retreat, the exodus of the KMT from mainland China and across the ocean to Taiwan, the last piece of territory it controls. By the end of December 1949, the retreat is largely complete. Chiang and 2 million of his men have fled the mainland and begun self-governing Taiwan as the Republic of China. Meanwhile, Mao and the CCP are in control on the mainland, where the communists still rule today. China's civil war never officially ends. No peace treaty is signed, and while a KMT plan to regroup and take the mainland never materializes, the CCP is not strong enough to invade Taiwan either. So the two old adversaries end up in a face-off over the narrow Taiwan Strait, which continues into the modern day, each with a score to settle against the other. Xi Jinping is now thinking about resolving this 100-year-old conflict once and for all, vowing to reunify Taiwan with the mainland by force if necessary. On paper, this looks like an easy task. China is much stronger these days, with an economy and military that dwarfs Taiwan. So, why hasn't Beijing invaded yet? Well, because through thick and thin, the KMT and then the Taiwanese government have remained friends with their Second World War ally, the United States. The relationship between America and the KMT has not always been smooth sailing, but certainly since the Cold War took hold, and with it a fear of anything communist, Washington has used its allies in Taipei to power balance against the CCP. Indeed, after the CCP took over mainland China, America refused to recognize them as a legitimate government. As far as Washington was concerned, the real Chinese authorities were on Taiwan, and where America went, the rest of the world followed. For decades, most of the world's major powers, aside from the USSR, refused to have any political dealings with the CCP and would speak only with Taipei. That changed in the late 60s and early 70s, however, when the Soviets and Chinese fell out and actually went to war with one another. Sensing a chance to split the world's two big communist allies apart, President Nixon and then President Carter thawed relations with Beijing. Then, in 1979, the US officially established relations with Beijing, recognizing them as the legitimate government of China for the first time. In return, the Chinese wanted America to break its alliance with the Taiwanese. Washington wasn't so keen on that, leading to a messy compromise. A lot of political wheeling and dealing follows, the upshot of which is this. America pays lip service to the One China policy, a line you might have heard before. Basically, what that says is there's only one China and it's ruled from Beijing. This is the reason that Taiwan isn't officially recognized as its own country. But at the same time, America also supplies Taiwan with the weapons to defend itself if China should ever attack. And it strongly hints, though it doesn't actually say, that if China were ever to attack Taiwan, America would join the war to defend it. This is why Xi hasn't dared invade the island just yet. He's not particularly worried about fighting the Taiwanese. What he really doesn't want to do is fight America. But it's unclear whether that delicate truce will hold forever. As China grows its economy and pumps more and more money into the military, the balance of power between Beijing and Washington is shifting in Beijing's favor. At what point the balance will have shifted so far that Xi actually decides to launch an invasion is a subject of huge debate and a topic for another time. But many fear it would be so large and catastrophic that it would effectively begin a third world war. And that's why there is so much attention on Taiwan right now. Hey everyone, thanks for watching. If you like content like this and want to see more of it in your feed, don't forget to hit like and subscribe. And if you want to see the first part of this story, what might happen if China and Taiwan ever went to war with each other, we've already done a video about it here. Are there any conflicts you want to see us cover in the future? Let us know in the survey down in the comments.